Today we're going to talk about a pretty underrated piece of archery equipment, and that is the Quivalizer. So I've had the Quivalizer on my bow for probably around about 6 months or so now. The main concept behind this is basically giving you more leverage at full draw. So if you look at all of your target archers shooting 27, 30 inch, 33 inch front rods, generally speaking, the longer that bar, the more leverage you're going to get and the more stability you're going to have when you're aiming. Now the trade-off of this is when you're hunting and you're carrying around a bow that's got a rod that's coming all the way out to here, that's super impractical, and if you're trying to drag it through thick scrub and stuff like that too, it's just going to get caught up. So that's where the Quivalizer is really handy. It's kind of a shorter version, but still giving you a little bit of leverage as well. I believe it's between 16 to 22 inches depending on the model. There's a couple of different types, and they are coming out with different models fairly regularly as well. So this is kind of a good in between. It gives you the leverage of what a target stabilizer would have, but it's still compact enough where you're hunting, it's kind of easy to navigate around too. Most hunting stabilizer is going to be a 6 or an 8 inch. Some people even choose not to use one at all. Definitely would have at least something on the front of the bow. Your basic concept behind stabilization is when you pull this bow back, what will happen is, because we're drawing the bow out to the right side of our body, because obviously we can't draw the bow back dead straight because we'd have to pull this bow strings through our arm, which you obviously can't do. So we've got bone, muscle, all sorts of stuff in there. So we have to apply a little bit of, not torque, but I guess a bias to the bow. We're kind of drawing out to the side. And you'll notice if you're shooting a longbow or a bare bow, something without any stabilization, when you let go, it'll tend to kind of kick back to square. And the point of this is to resist the kick until your arrow's left the bow. So that's probably its biggest benefit, I suppose, as well as obviously giving you the stabilization when you're aiming to kind of slow down that pin flow too. Some people use like a 6-inch rod and then like a 6-inch rod off the side as well to give you a bit of balance this way as well as front wise, because you'll see a lot of people will hang a really heavy quiver off the right hand side of their bow, and if there's nothing to balance it on the left side, when you pull back, your bow is going to want to tip this way. The Quivalizer is really good in both planes because there's a locking screw just in here where you can actually rotate that and offset the angle of your arrows and kind of use the weight of your arrows like a side rod as well without adding extra mass. One of the arguments against this is people say it's bulky. It's not really. You can actually, like with this quick disconnect on the side here, if I pull that off, I can then slide this in and actually mount it on the back of my sight in here, sort of really quickly detach from the front and mount on the side of the sight. So that's a really simple process if you find you are walking through somewhere that is a bit dense. The first time I had this on my bow, we were going through a really dense bit of scrub through like a creek bed. Took it off, put it on the side of the bow, no issues. Then when we got up and we were kind of sitting and waiting at the top, I put it back on, walked back to the car later and forgot I had it back on the front. Like, it just made no difference. Because most of the time when you're carrying your bow, if you're carrying it by your side and the rod's facing up, doesn't matter if it's that long or nothing, like it's not really going to get in your way at all. The other thing with this is you can actually hang it over your shoulder, so when you're hunting you can kind of hold it like that, and that's a really easy way to carry it, which you can't do with your shorter rods. The only time you're going to run into issue, I'm not sure this will be in the frame, but is where people hold the string and they kind of let it drag along the ground a little bit. For me, and I guess if you're taller, you have a little bit of a gap between the Quivalizer and the ground. The only time you might run into strife is if you're holding the bow by the string and you're shorter and that Quivalizer is touching the ground. But that's the only time it's, I guess, inconvenient lengthwise, but you gain so much more from the leverage and the stability when you're aiming. So what I've got is a bit of a dodgy laser rubber band set up on the front here. So I'll just flick that on. And hopefully, yep, I'm going to aim that down there at the target. And then what I'm going to do is kind of show you the difference stability-wise with this versus a 10-inch or 6-inch rod as far as aiming goes. Obviously not going to shoot the arrow because the laser's pointed nowhere near where I want it. So stability-wise, that's pretty good. You can see a little bit of left to right wiggle, which is something that you get with these hunting bows, high let-off bows. Once you hit the wall, you get that kind of wobble left to right. The main thing you want to look at is the vertical movement of the bow, because that's kind of dictated by that front rod and how steady I'm holding as well, I guess. So what I'm going to do now is rip this off, put on a 6-inch stabiliser, and then compare the difference in stability. I swapped the Quivalizer over to a little 10-inch Bee Stinger Sport Hunter rod with my super high-tech elastic band laser. So now we're going to compare the differences in how it holds on the target to what the Quivalizer did just a moment ago. It may not look super obvious on the video, but I definitely noticed there was more vertical movement with that rod versus on the Quivalizer, and definitely through my sight, it's something I picked up as well. And that's a 10-inch rod, so that's on the longer side of what you'd be using for those short bars. If you drop to an 8 or a 6, you're gonna see even more of that movement on the target. The thing you've got to ask yourself when you're looking at a stabiliser is are you the kind of person that's gonna want a super light bow, super light setup, so that when you've hiked for hours and you get to that chance to make your shot, you're going to be feeling more, I guess, less tired, I suppose, because you've been hiking less weight around. If you've got a really heavy bow, then the advantage of that is, although you've got to hike in where you're going to hunt, when you draw back on that shot, it's going to settle down that pin float a lot quicker as well. So kind of think about which weight-wise is going to suit you better. Quivalizer's at a really good price point in the market as well. So it comes in around $3 to $350 Australian dollars, depending on the US conversion, and if you're getting an adjustable spacer or just a fixed spacer. And if you're gonna buy something like a tight spot quiver and then a really good quality rod like a Bee Stinger kit, say you buy a Bee Stinger adjustable kit for around the 350, 400 Australian, you buy a tight spot quiver between 2 and 250, you're up around the 600 mark there for both of those. You're paying pretty much half that for a Quivalizer. So it is a very, very good price point piece of equipment. I would recommend, if you're gonna get micro diameter shafts like a 4.2 mil, to get the one with the adjustable spacers. I'm shooting an Axis 5 mil in the fixed one, and it is fine, but I think if you went any smaller than that, you would probably have issues. I mean, it would work, but it might not be as solid if you're walking around the bush and your bow's moving around a lot too. So have a look at the the adjustable version. If you're using a small diameter shaft, 5 mil will be fine, 5 mil or bigger in just your standard one too. It also comes in an 8 arrow version as well. So if you want to carry 8 arrows in the bush for whatever reason, you can do that too. So there's quite a few different features, heaps of colors it comes in as well. I hope that's made a bit more sense, kind of explain the Quivalizer and the benefits as a hunting stabilizer, and they're available at elizararchery.com.